It is time. Welcome. I should really reset this. Where even is it? I really need to organize these. Here we are. To reset this. Let's just put the start end date. Is that the time to go through? Oh god damn it. Just a moment. Oh, I didn't hit start goal. That's why. There we go. One away. Now, I was supposed to be streaming with Sis today, but then she went and got herself shit-faced and hasn't responded in a few hours, so I assume she passed out. So instead, I'll just be doing a chill reading stream because my friends seem to like me reading to them. So maybe you will as well. Anyway, I happen to have Frankenstein on my computer because God, it was years ago now that I was still in secondary school. But over the summer, when I was doing advanced higher English, my teacher casually dropped, "Oh yeah, by the way, you have to read Dracula and Frankenstein for the first day of back at school." So I spent a month reading those and an extra book for a dissertation. And then when I finally got all those done and got to school, turns out it was like, nah, we'll just not do those books because no one else had read them. So I've read those two for nothing. But I have that means I still had them on my computer, and I should be reading them to you now. The first chapter of Frankenstein is told through letters, and I think we move into more of a prose after that. Volume 1, Letter 1. To Miss Saville, England. St. Petersburg, December 11th, 17 something something. You will rejoice to hear that no disaster has accompanied the commencement of an enterprise which you have regarded with such evil foreboding. I arrived here yesterday, and my first task is to assure my dear sister of my welfare and increasing confidence in the success of my undertaking. I am already far north of London, and as I walk in the streets of Petersburg, I feel a cold northern breeze play upon my cheek, which braces my nerves and fills me with delight. Do you understand this feeling? This breeze which has travelled from the regions towards which I am advancing gives me a foretaste of those icy climes. Inspired by this wind's promise, my daydreams become more frivolent and vivid. I try in vain to be persuaded that the is the seat of frost and desolation. It's ever present. It's ever present itself to my imagination as the region of beauty and delight. There, Margaret, the sun is forever visible. Its broad disk just skirting the horizon and diffusing perpetual splendor. There, for with your leave, my sister, I will put some trust in the preceding navigators. Their snow and frost are ba- Their snow and frost are banished, and sailing over a calm sea, we may be wafted to a land surpassing in wonder and in beauty every region hitherto discovered in the habitable globe. Its its productions and features may be without example, as the phenomena of the heavenly bodies undoubtedly are those undiscovered solitudes. What may not be expected in a country of eternal light? I may there discover the wondrous power which attracts the needle, and may regulate 1,000 celestial observations. That requires only this voyage to render them their seeming eccentricities consistent forever. I shall satellite my arduent curiosity with the sight of a part of the world never before visited. I may tread a land never before imprinted by the foot of man. Shush. Quiet critical. Where was I? These are my these are my enticements, and they are sufficient to conquer all fear of danger or death, and to and induce me to commence this laborious voyage with the joy of a child feels when he embarks in a little boat with his holiday mates on an expedition of discovery up his native river. But supposing all these conjunctures to be false, you cannot contest the unestimable benefit which I shall confer on all mankind to the last generation by discovering a passage near the pole to to the countries to those countries to reach which at present so many months are requested, or by ascertaining the secrets of the magnet, which, if at all possible, can only be effected by an undertaking such as mine. These reflections have dispelled the agitation with which I began my letter, and I feel my heart glow with an enthusiasm which elevates me to heaven. For nothing contributes so much to trying to God, there's so many big words in this book. Tranquilize the mind as a steady purpose, a point on which the soul may fix its intellectual eye. This expedition has been the favorite dream of my early years. I have read with ardor the accounts of the various voyages which have been made in the prospect of arriving at the North Pacific Ocean, through the sea which surrounds the pole. You remember that a history of all voyages made for purposes of discovery composed the whole of our good Uncle Thomas's library. My education was neglected, yet I was passionately fond of reading. These volumes are my study day and night, and my familiarity with them increased that regret which I felt as a child on learning that my father's dying injunction had forbid my uncle to allow me to embark in a seafaring life. These visions faded when I pursued, for the first time, those poets entrance, whose infusions entranced my soul and lifted it to heaven. I also became a poet, and for 1 year lived in a paradise of my own creation. I imagined that I also might obtain a niche in the temple where the names of Homer and Shakespeare are cons- consecrated. You are well acquainted with my failure and how heavily I bore the disappointment. But just as that time that I inherited the fortune of my cousin, and my thoughts were turned into the channel of their earlier bent. 6 years have passed since I resolved on my undertaking. I can't even now remember for which I dedicated myself to this great enterprise. I accompanied the whale fisher on several expeditions to the North Sea. I voluntarily endured cold, famine, thirst, and want of sleep. I often worked harder than the common sailor during the day, and devoted my nights to the study of mathematics, the theory of medicine, and those branches of physical science for which a naval adventurer might might derive the greatest practical advantage. Twice I actually hired myself as an undermate and a great land whaler, and a Greenland whaler, and acquitted myself to admiration. I felt, I must own, I must own, I felt a little proud when my captain offered me the second dignity in the vessel, and entered and entreated me to remain with the greatest earnestness. So valuable did he consider my services. And now, dear Margaret, I do not deserve to accomplish some great purpose. My life must have been passed in ease and luxury, but I preferred glory to every enticement that wealth placed in my path. Oh, that some encouraging voice, oh, that some encouraging voice would answer in the affirmative. My courage and my resolution is firm. My hope fluctuates and my spirits are often depressed. I am about to proceed on a long and difficult voyage, the emergence of which will demand all my fortitude. I am required not only to raise the spirit of others, but sometimes to sustain my own when theirs are failing. This is the most favorable period for traveling in Russia. Then fly quickly over the snow and they they fly quickly over the snow in their sleds. The motion is pleasant and, in my opinion, far more agreeable than that of the English stagecoach. The cold is not excessive if you are wrapped in furs, a dress which I have already adopted. For there is great difference between walking the deck and remaining seated motionless for hours when no exercise prevents the blood from actually freezing in your veins. I have no ambition to lose my life on the post road between St. Petersburg and Archangel. I shall depart for the latter town in a fortnight or 3 weeks, and my intention is to hire a ship there, which can easily be done by paying the insurance for the owner, and to engage as many sailors as I think necessary among those who are accustomed to the whale fishing. I do not intend to sail until the month of June, and when shall I return? Ah, dear sister, I cannot answer this question. If I succeed, many, many months, perhaps years, will pass before you and I may meet. If I fail, you will see me again soon, or never. Farewell, farewell, my dear, excellent Margaret. Heaven shower, heaven shower down blessings on you, and save me that I may and again testify my gratitude for all your love and kindness. Your affectionate brother, R. Wilson. Basically, this is book doesn't even start with Victor Frankenstein. We'll get to him, but for now, it's this sailor guy. To Miss Saville, London. Letter 2. To Miss Saville, England. Archangel, 28th of March, 17 something something. How slow the time passes here, encompassed as I am by frost and snow. Yet a second step is taken towards my enterprise. I have hired a vessel, and I am occupied in collecting my sailors. Those whom I have already engaged appear to be men on whom I can depend, and I am certainly possessed of dauntless courage. But I have one want which I have never yet been able to satisfy in the absence of the object, of which I now feel as as a most severe evil. I have no friend, Margaret. When I am glowing with the enthusiasm of success, there will be none to participate my joy. If I am if I am if I am assailed by disappointment, no one will endure to sustain me in dejection. I shall commit my thoughts to paper. It is true, but that is a poor medium of the communication of feeling. I desire the company of a man who could sympathize with me, whose eyes would reply to mine. You may deem me a romantic, my dear sister, but I bitterly feel the want of a friend. I wish no one near me. I have no one near me, gentle yet courageous, possessed of a cultivated as well as cap- capacious mind, whose tastes are like my own, to approve or amend my plans. How would such a friend repair the faults of your poor brother? I am too ardent in execution and too impatient of difficulties, but it is still a greater evil to me that I am self-educated. For the first 14 years of my life I ran wild on a common and read nothing but our Uncle Thomas's books of voyages. At that age I became acquainted with the celebrated poets of our own country, but it was only when it ceased to be in my power to derive its most important beliefs from such a conviction that I perceived the necessity of becoming acquainted with more languages than that of my own native country. Now I am 28, and I am in reality more illiterate than many schoolboys of 15. It is true that I have thought more, and that my daydreams are more extended and magnificent, but they want, as the painters call it, keeping. And a great and I greatly need a friend who would have sense enough not to despise me as a romantic, and affectionate enough for me to endeavour to regulate my mind. Well, these are useless complaints. I shall certainly find no friend on the open ocean, nor even here an archangel among merchants and seamen. Seamen. Yet some feelings, unaligned to the dross of human nature, beat even these rugged bosoms. My lieutenant, for instance, is a man of wonderful courage and enterprise. He is madly desirous. He is madly desirous of glory. He is an Englishman, and in the midst of of national and professional prejudices, unsoftened by cultivation, retains some of the most noble endowments of humanity. I first became acquainted with him on board a whale vessel, finding that he was unemployed in the city. I easily engaged him to assist my enterprise. The master is a person of an excellent disposition, and is remarkable in the ship of his gentleness and mildness in his discipline. He is indeed of so admirable a nature that he will not hunt a favourite and almost amuse a favourite and almost the only amusement here, as it cannot endure to spill blood. He is, moreover, heroically generous. Some years ago he loved a young Russian lady of moderate fortune, and having amassed a considerable sum in prize money, the father girl contested to the match. Father the girl consented to the match. He saw his mistress once before the destined ceremony, but she was bathed in tears and throwing herself at his feet, entreated him to spare her, confessing at the same time that she loved another, but he was poor and that her father would never consent to the union. My generous friend reassured the suppliant, and on being informed of the name of her lover, instantly abandoned his pursuit. He had already bought a farm of his money, on which he had designed to pass the remainder of his life, but he bestowed the whole on his rival, together with the remains of his prize money to purchase stock, and then himself solicited the young woman's father to consent to their marriage with her lover. But the old man decidedly refused, thinking himself bound in honour to my friend, who, when he found the father inexorable, quitted his country, nor returned until he heard that his former mistress was married according to his inclinations, in, in accordance to her inclinations. What a noble fellow, you will exclaim, he is so. But then he has passed all his life on board a vessel, and has scarcely an idea beyond the rope and the shroud. But do not suppose that because I complain a little, or because I can conceive a consolidation for my toils which I may never know, that I am wavering in my resolve. Those are not fixed as fate, and my voyage is now only delayed until the weather shall permit my embarkment. The winter has been dreadfully severe, and the spring promises well, and is considered as a remarkably early season, so that perhaps I may sail sooner than I expected. I shall do nothing rashly. You know me sufficiently to confide in my prudence and considerations, whether the safety of others is committed to my care. I cannot describe to you my sensations on the near on the near prospect of my undertaking. It is impossible to communicate to you a conception of the trembling sensation, half pleasurable and half fearful, with which I am preparing to depart. I'm going to unexplored regions, to the land of mist and snow, but I shall kill no albatross, therefore do not be alarmed for my safety. Shall I meet you again, after having traversed intense seas and returned by the most southern cape of Africa or America? I do not expect such success, yet I cannot bear to look on the reverse of the picture. I continue to write to me by every opportunity. I may receive your letters, though the chance is very doubtful, on some occasion when I need them most to support my spirits. I love you very tenderly. Remember me with affection, should you never hear from me again. Your affectionate brother, Robert Bolton. Walton. Robert Walton. I find this very was like be a, I don't know, I just think it's wild. Like if my brother started fucking texting me like this, I'd be fucking thinking someone replaced him or something. Alright, letter free. To Miss Saville, England. July 7th, 17 something something. My dear sister, I wrote a few lines in haste to say that I am safe and well advanced on my voyage. This letter will reach England by a merchantman now on its home. And on its homeward voyage from Archangel. More fortunate than I, who may not see my native land perhaps for many years. I am, however, in good spirits. My men are bold and apparently firm on purpose, firm of purpose. Nor do the floating sheets of ice that continually pass us indicate the dangers of the region towards which we are advancing. Appear, of which we are advancing appear to dismay them. We have already reached a very high latitude, but it is the height of summer, and although not so warm as in England, the southern gales which blow us speedily towards those shores which I so ardently desire to attain breathe a degree of renovating warmth which I had not expected. No incidents have hitherto befallen us that would make a figure in a letter. One or two stiff gales and the breaking of a mast are accidents which experienced navigators scarcely remember to record, and I shall well contest if nothing worse happens to us during our voyage. Adieu, my dear Margaret. Be assured that for my own sake as well as yours, I will not rashly encounter danger. I will be cool, preserved, and prudent. Remember me, remember me to all my English friends. Most affectionately yours, R.W. Letter 4. To Miss Saville, England, August 5th, 17 something something. So strange an incident has happened to us that I cannot forbear to record it. Although it is very probable that you will see me before these papers can come into your possession. Last Monday, July 31st, we were nearly surrounded by ice, which closed in the ship of all sides, scarcely leaving her and the sea room in which scarcely leaving her the sea room in which she floated. Our situation was somewhat dangerous, especially as we compassed round by a very thick fog. We accordingly lay to, hoping that some change would take place in the atmosphere and weather. Around 2 o'clock the mist cleared away, and we beheld, stretched out in every direction, vast and irregular plains of ice which seemed to have no end. Some of my comrades groaned, and my own mind began to grow watchful with anxious thoughts, when a strange sight suddenly attracted our attention, and diverted our solicitude from our own situation. We perceived a low carriage, fixed on a sled and drawn by dogs, pass on towards the north, at the distance of half a mile, which had the shape of a man, but apparently of gigantic stature, sat at the sled, and guided the dogs. He watched the rapid progress of the traveller with her telescopes until he was lost among the distant equities of the ice. His appearance excited our unqualified wonder. We were, as we believed, many hundreds of miles from any land, but his apparition seemed to denote that it was not, in reality, so distant as we had surmised. Shut in, however, by ice, it was impossible to follow his tracks, which we had observed with the greatest attention. About 2 hours after this occurrence, we heard the ground sea, and before night the ice broke and freed our ship. We, however, lay until the morning, fearing to encounter in the dark those large loose masses which float about after the breaking up of the ice. I profited of this time to rest for a few hours. In the morning, however, as soon as it was light, I went upon deck and found all the sailors busy on one side of the vessel, apparently talking to someone in the sea. It was in fact a sled, uh, like like that we had seen before, which had drifted towards us in the night, or a large fragment of ice. Only one dog remained alive, but there was a human being within it, whom the sailors were persuading to enter the vessel. He was not, as the other travellers seemed to be, a savage inhabitant of some undiscovered island, but a European. When I appeared on deck, the master said, "He is our captain, and he will not allow you to perish in the open sea." On perceiving me, the stranger addressed me in English, though with foreign accent. "Before I come aboard your vessel," he says, "will you have the kindness to inform me wh- where, whither you are bound?" You may conceive You may conceive my astonishment on hearing such a question addressed to me from a man on the brink of destruction, to whom I should have supposed that my vessel would have been a resource which he would not have exchanged for the most precious wealth that the earth can afford. I replied, however, that we were on a voyage of discovery towards the northern pole. Upon hearing this, he appeared satisfied, and consented to come on board. Good God, Margaret! If I had seen the man who thus capitulated for his safety, your surprise would have been boundless. His limbs were nearly frozen, his body dreadfully emancipated by fatigue and suffering. I never saw a man in so wretched a condition. We attempted to carry him into the cabin, but as soon as he quitted the fresh air, he fainted. We accordingly brought him back to the deck and restored him to animation by rubbing him with brandy, and forcing him to swallow a small quantity. As soon as he as soon as he showed signs of life, we wrapped him up in blankets, and placed him near the chimney of the stovetop. No, the kitchen stove rather. By slow degrees he recovered and ate a little soup, which restored him wonderfully. 2 days passed in this manner before he was able to speak, and often feared that his suffering had deprived him of understanding. When he had in some measure recovered, I removed him I removed into my own cabin, and attended on him as much as my duty would permit. I never saw a more interesting creature. His eyes have generally an expression of wildness or even madness, but there are moments when if anyone performs an act of kindness towards him, or does him in any the most trifling service, his his whole countenance is lighted up, as if as it as it were with a beam of benevolence and sweetness that I never saw equaled. But he is generally melancholy and depressing, and sometimes he gnashes his teeth as if impatient of the weight of woes that oppress him. My guest was a little recovered. I had great trouble to keep off the men who wished to ask him 1,000 questions, but I would not allow him to be tormented by their idle curiosity. In a state of body and mind whose restoration evidently descended upon entire repose. Once, however, the lieutenant asked why he had come up so far upon the ice in so strange a vehicle. His countenance instantly assumed an aspect of the deepest gloom, and he asked, "To seek one who fled from me." "And did the man whom you pursued travel in the same fashion?" "Yes." "Then I fancy we have seen him. For the day between we picked you up, the day before we picked you up, we saw some dogs drawing a sled with a man in it across the ice." This aroused the stranger's attention, and he asked a multitude of questions concerning the route which the daemon, as he called him, had pursued. Soon after, when he was alone with me, I said, I have, doubtless, excited your curiosity, as well as that of the good people. But you are too considerate to make inquiries." "Certainly, it would indeed be very impertinent and inhumane of me to trouble you with inquisitiveness of mine." Yo, what's up? I'm afraid I'm not doing anything terribly exciting today. We're reading Frankenstein because I happen to have it on my computer. But hey, what's up? Thanks for the raid. Where was I? "And yet you rescued me from a strange and perilous situation. You have benevolently restored me to life." Soon after this, he inquired if I thought that the breaking up of the ice had destroyed the other sled. I replied that I could not answer with any degree of certainty. The ice had not broken until near midnight. The traveller might have arrived at a place of safety before that time, but of this I could not judge. For this time the stranger seemed very eager to be upon deck to watch for the sled which had before appeared, but I persuaded him to remain in the cabin, for he is far too weak to sustain the rawness of the atmosphere. But I have promised that someone would watch for him, and give him constant instant notice if any object should appear in the sight. So Frankenstein going, pretty good. We haven't even gotten to the actual story yet. The first chapter of Frankenstein is from the is like letters from this explorer guy to his sister. He's like going to the North Pole, and then he meets Frankenstein there, and the entire fucking story, the entirety of the story of Frankenstein is like what this explorer is transcribing from what Victor Frankenstein, who he meets on his voyage, is telling him. So canonically, the entire book is a letter he mailed to his sister. Yeah. Not to get actually on you. But yeah, Frankenstein is the scientist, and the monster he creates isn't actually ever given a name. Uh, Frankenstein's monster is entirely a creation of, I believe, pop culture, or it might have been a movie adaptation or something. But the book never refers to him once as Frankenstein's monster. He's given names such as Demon or the Wretch, or whatever else, but he's never given a name. And I believe it's a deliberate choice by the author. I'm not sure why we've decided to call him Frankenstein's monster. Pardon me. Where was I? Here we are. Such as my journal of what relates to this strange occurrence up to the present day. The stranger has gradually improved in health, but is very silent and appears uneasy when anyone except myself enters his cabin. Yet his manners are so consolidating and gentle. The sailors are all interested in him, although they have had very little communications with him. For my own part, I begin to love him as a brother, and his constant and deep grief fills me with sympathy and compassion. He must have been a noble creature in his better days, being even now and wrecked, so attractive and admirable. Also, yeah, by the way, this sailor guy and Victor Frankenstein are totally gay for each other. Like, how can you read shit like fucking he must have been a noble creature in his better days, being even now in wreck, so attractive and admirable, and not be like, yeah, these these two are gay for each other. I said in one of my letters, my dear Margaret, that I should find no friend on this wide ocean. Yet I have found a man who, before his spirits had been broken by misery, I should have been happy to have possessed as the brother of my heart. I should continue my journey concerning the stranger at intervals, should I have any fresh incidents to record. August 13th, 17 something something. My affections for my guest increase every day. He excites at once my admiration and my pity to an astonishing degree. You can How can I see so noble a creature destroyed by misery without feeling the most poignant grief? He is so gentle yet so wise. His mind is so cultivated, and when he speaks, those words are culled with the choicest art. Yet they flow with rapidity and unparalleled eloquence. He is now much recovered from his illness, and he is continually on deck, apparently watching for the sled that preceded his own. Yet, although unhappy, he is not so utterly occupied by his own misery that he interests himself deeply in the employment of others. He has asked me many questions concerning my design, and I have related my little history frankly to him. He appeared pleasant. He appeared pleased with the confidence, and suggested several alterations to my plan, which I shall find exceedingly useful. There is no pedantry in his manner, but all he does appears to spring solely from the interest he instinctively takes in the welfare of those who surround him. He is often overcome by gloom, and then he sits by himself and tries to overcome all that sullen or unsocial in his humor. These what kind of a word is this? Paroxysmus pass from him like a cloud from before the sun. Though his dejection never leaves him, I endeavored to win his confidence, and I trust that I have succeeded. One day I mentioned to him the desire I have always felt of finding a friend who might sympathize with me, and direct me by his counsel. I said I did not belong to that class of men who are offered an who are offended by advice. I am self-educated, and perhaps I hardly rely sufficiently upon my own powers. I wish, therefore, that my company should be wiser and more experienced myself, to confirm and support me. Nor have I believed, nor have I believed it impossible to find a true friend. I agree with you, replied the stranger, in believing that friendship is not only desirable, but a possible acquisition. I once had a friend, the most noble of human creatures, and I am entitled, therefore, to judge respecting friendships. You have hope and the world before you, and have no cause for despair. But I have lost everything, and cannot begin life anew. He said this. As he said this, his his countenance became expressive of a calm, settled grief that touched me to the heart. He was silent, and presently retired to his cabin. Even broken in spirit as he is, no one can feel more deeply. No one can feel more deeply than he does the beauties of nature. The stark sky, the sea, the every sight afforded to those wonderful regions, seems still to have the power of elevating his soul from earth. Such a man has a double existence. He may suffer misery and be overwhelmed by disappointments, yet when he has retired into himself, he will he will be like a celestial spirit and a halo around him. Within those circles no grief or folly ventures. Will you laugh at the enthusiasm I express concerning this divine wanderer? If you do, I must have certainly lost that simplicity which was once your characteristic charm. Yet, if you will, smile at the warmth of my expression, will I find every day new cause for repeating them. Yesterday the stranger said to me, "You may easily perceive, Captain Bolton, that I have suffered great and unparalleled misfortune. I determined once that the memory of these evils should die with me, but you have won me you have won me to alter my determination. You seek for knowledge and wisdom as I once did, and ardently hope that the gratification of your wishes may not be serpents to sting you, as mine have been. I do not know I do not know that the relation of my misfortune will be useful to you. Yet, if you are inclined, listen to my tale. I believe the strange incidents connected with it will afford a view of nature which may enlarge your facilities and understanding. You will hear of powers and occurrences such as you have been accustomed to believe impossible. But do not doubt that my tale conveys in its series an evident internal evidence of the truth of the events of which it is composed. You may easily conceive that I was much gratified by the offered communication, yet I could not endure that he would renew his grief by a recital of his misfortunes. I felt the greatest earnestness to hear the promised narrative, partially from curiosity and partially from a strong desire to am- ameli- amelior- to ameliorate his fate. Hold on, can I get to read this?
Ameliorate.
Ameliorate. Desire to ameliorate his fate. For in my power, I express these feelings in my answer. I thank you, he replied, for his sympathy, but it is useless. My fate is near fulfilled. I wait for but one event, and then I shall repose in peace. I understand your feeling. Continued, continued he, perceiving that I wished to interrupt him. But you are mistaken, my friend. If thus you will allow me to name you, nothing can alter my destiny. Listen to my history, and you'll perceive how irrevocably it is determined. Then he told me that he would commence his narrative the next day, when I should be at leisure. This promise drew from me the warmest thanks I had resolved every night. I had resolved every night when I am not engaged to record as nearly as possible, in his own words, what he has related to me during the day. If I should be engaged, I will at least make a note. This manuscript will doubtlessly afford you the greatest pleasure, but to me who knows him and who hear it from his own lips, with that interest and sympathy shall I read it in some future day. And now we're actually getting into the first chapter, but just a second. I mentioned I was doing this stream to a friend a while ago, and she said she would want to. She said she would want to listen to it, so I'll message her. There we go. Where was I? Yes, now we actually get into Frankenstein's story, which are all being transcribed by this adventurer. I think his name was Robert Walton. Yeah, Robert Walton. Look at me, I can remember shit. Anyway, that was volume 1. Now we're into chapter 1. I am by birth Genevieve.
Genovese.
I am by birth a Genovese, and my family is one of the most distinguished of that republic. My ancestors have been for many years councillors and syndics. My father has filled several public situations with honour and reputation. He was respected by all who knew him for his integrity and God, it keeps splitting up words so it makes them harder to read.
Indefati. Gable.
No idea what that's supposed to mean. Attention to public business. He passed his younger days perpetually occupied by the affairs of his country, and it was not until the decline of life that he thought of marrying and bestowing on the state sons who might carry his virtues and his name down to prosperity. As the circumstances of his marriage illustrate his character, I cannot refrain from relating them. One of his most intimate friends was a merchant from who, from a flourishing state, fell through numerous mischances into poverty. This man, whose name was Beaufort, was a proud and unbending disposition, and could not bear to live in poverty and oblivion in the same country where he had formerly been distinguished for his rank and magnificence. Having paid his debts, therefore, in the most honourable manner, he retreated with his daughter to the town of Lawrence, where he lived unknown and wretchedness. My father loved Beaufort with the truest friendship, and was deeply grieved by his retreat in these unfortunate circumstances. He grieved also for the loss of his society, and resolved to seek him out and endeavour to pursue him to begin the world again, for his credit and assistance. Beaufort had taken effectual measures to conceal himself, and it was 10 months before my father discovered his abode. Overjoyed at this discovery, he hastened to the house, which was situated in a mean street near the what's this word? Rius?
Roos.
Near the Rus. But when he entered, misery and despair alone welcomed him. Buford had saved but a very small sum of money from the wreck of his fortune, but it was insufficient to deprive him with sustenance for some months. And in the meantime, he hoped to procure some respectable employment in a merchant's house. The interval had consequently spent in inaction. His grief only became more deep and rankling when he had leisure for reflection. And at length it took so fast hold of his mind that at the end of the 3 months he lay on a bed of sickness, incapable of any exertion. His daughter attended to him with the greatest tenderness, but she saw with despair that their little fund was rapidly decreasing, and there was no other prospect of support. But Caroline Beaufort possessed a mind of an uncommon mould, and her courage rose to support her in her adversity. She procured plain work. She plaited straw, and by various means contrived to earn a pittance scarcely sufficient to support life. Several months passed in this manner. Her father grew worse, and her time was more entirely occupied in attending to him. Her means of sustenance decreased, and in the 10th month, her father died in her arms, leaving her an orphan and a beggar. This last blow overcame her, and she knelt by Buford's coffin, weeping bitterly when my father entered the chamber. He came like a protecting spirit to the poor girl, who committed herself to his care, and after the interment of his friend, he conducted her to Geneva and placed her under the protection of a relation. 2 years after this event, Caroline became his wife. It's a little fucked up, isn't it? Like, is it that just me? You your best friend dies and you marry his sister? Not his sister, his daughter. That's even worse. Your best friend dies and you adopt and then marry his daughter. That's a dick move, right? That's not just me. I'd be mad as fuck if yeah, this different time. This was written like the 1700s, I think. When was Frankenstein written? It was written in 1816. So yeah, definitely a different time. But I'd be mad. All I'm saying with Spoots is, if I die, don't go trying to date my daughter or son. You know, if I have one of those. My father became a husband and a parent. He's found his time so occupied by the duties of his new situation that he relinquished many of his public employments and devoted himself to the education of his children. Of these, I was the eldest and the designated successor to all his labours and utilities. No creature could have more tender parents than mine. My improvement and health were their constant care, and especially as I remained for several years, remained for several years their only child. But before I continue my narrative, I must record an incident which took place when I was 4 years of age. Shit, there goes my plans. Were you planning on murdering me and marrying my child, bro? And imagine if your mum died and one of her friends tried to marry you. I'm pretty sure you'd be mad as fuck. And I'm sure she'd be mad as fuck. My father had a sister, whom he tenderly loved, and who married early in life to an Italian gentleman. Soon after her marriage, she had accompanied her husband into her native country, and for some years my father had very little communication with her. At the time I mentioned she died, a few months after he received a letter from her husband, acquainting him with his intentions of marrying an Italian lady, and requesting my father take charge of the infant Elizabeth, the only child of his deceased sister. It is my wish, he said, that you should consider her as your own daughter, and educate her thus. My mother's fortune is secured to her, the documents of which I will commit to your keeping. Reflect upon this proposal, and decide whether you would prefer educating your niece uh, to her, yourself to her being brought up by her stepmother. /J/J. I don't know why I'm not popping. No, serious. I can't believe you would threaten this, but you're literally so problematic. I'm canceling you right now. My father did not hesitate, and immediately went to Italy, when he might accompany the little Elizabeth to her future home. And I have often heard my mother say that she was at that time the most beautiful child she had ever seen. They showed signs, even then, of a gentle and affectionate disposition. These indications and a desire to bind so closely as possible to the ties of domestic love determined my mother to consider Elizabeth as my future wife. That's a cousin. That's his cousin. What is wrong with his family? Mom said she would be upset because her only friends are very much related to me. Oh, I mean that. It's kind of sad. I'm real. No, no offense to your mom, sis. She knows I love her really. But and to be fair, we're already this book's already getting into marrying cousins, so I don't know. I don't think that's off the table either. By this book's logic, a design to which she never found reason to repent. From this time, Elizabeth Lavenza became my playfellow, and as we grew older, my friend. She was docile and good-tempered, yet gay and playful, as a summer insect. Although she was lively and animated, her feelings were strong and deep, and her disposition uncommonly affectionate. No one could better enjoy liberty, yet no one could submit with more grace than she did to constraint and caprice. Her imagination was luxuriant, yet her capabilities of application was great. Her person was the image of her mind. Her hazel eyes, although as lively as a bird's, possessed an attractive softness. Her figure was light and airy, and though capable of enduring great fatigue, she appeared the most. I shoot on a favorite. She appeared the most fragile creature in the world. While I admired her understanding and fancy, I loved to tend on her as I should on a favorite animal. I never saw so much grace. I never saw so much grace, both of person and mind, until to so little pretension. Everyone adored Elizabeth. If the servants had any request to make, it was always for her intersection. We were strangers to any species of disillusion and dispute. The, we were strangers to any species of dis, disunion and dispute. For although there was a great dismal dismalitude in our characters, there was an harmony, and that very dismalitude. Why is there so many huge words in this book? Was that like the style back in the 1800s? Or was it? I was more calm and philosophical than my companion, yet my temper was not so yielding. My application was of longer endurance, and it was not so severe whilst it endured. I keep losing my place. Here we are. I delighted in investigating the facts relative to the actual world. She busied herself in the following of the aerial creations of the poet. The world was a secret to me, which I desired to discover. To her, it was a vacancy which she sought to people that she which she sought to people with imaginations of her own. My brothers were considerably younger than myself, but I had a friend and one of my schoolfellows. Why do they keep calling them fellows? I'm gonna start referring to you guys as that. Like, oh, that Spoot's one of my fellows. Ah, yes, this is my college fellow, my work fellows, who compensated for this deficiency. Henry Clarval was the son of a merchant of Geneva, an intimate friend of my father. He was a boy of singular talent and fancy. I remember when he was 9 years old, he wrote a fairy tale which was the delight and amusement of all his companions. His favourite study consisted in books of chivalry and romance. And when very young, I can remember when we used to act plays composed by him out of these favourite books. The principal characters of which were Orlando, Robin Hood, Amaldus, and St. George. No youth could have passed more happily than mine. My parents were indulgent and my companions amiable. Our studies were never forced, and by some means we always had an end placed in view, which excited us to ardor in the persec Jesus Christ, which excited us to ardor in the prosecution of them. What the fuck is?
Prosecution.
Yeah, it is prosecution. It was by this method, and not by emulation, we were urged we were urged to application. Elizabeth was not instigated to apply herself to drawing, that her companions might not outstrip her. But though the desire of pleasing her aunt by the representation of some favourite scenes done by her own done by her own hand, we learned Latin and English that we might read the writings in those languages. So far from study being made odious to us through punishment, we loved application, and our amusements would have been the labours of other children. Perhaps we did not read so many books or learn languages so quickly as those who were disciplined according to the ordinary methods. But what we learned was impressed the most deeply in our memories. Yo, what's up? How's it hanging? Who was I? In this description of our domestic circle, I include Henry Clerval, for he was constantly with us. He went to school with me and generally passed the afternoons at our house. For being an only child and destitute of companions at home, his father was well pleased that he should find associates at our house, and we were never completely happy. We were never completely happy when Clerval was absent. I feel pleasure in dwelling on the recollections of childhood, before misfortune had tainted my mind and changed its bright vision of extensive usefulness into gloomy and narrow reflections upon oneself. But in drawing the pictures of my early days, I must not omit the record of those events which led by in- insensible steps to my after tale of misery. And when I would account to myself the birth of that passion, which afterwards ruled my destiny, I find it arise, like a mountain river, from ignoble and almost forgotten sources. But swelling as it proceeded, it became the torrent which, in its course, has swept away all my hopes and joys. Natural philosophy is the genius that had relegated my fate, and I desire, therefore, in this narration, to state those facts which led to my predilection
Predilection for.
predilection for that science. When I was 13 years of age, we all went on a party of pleasure to the baths near Fonen. The inclemency of the weather obliged us to remain a day confined to the inn. In this house I chanced to find a volume of the work of Cornelius Agrippia. I opened it with apathy. The fury which he attempted to demonstrate, the wonderful facts which he relates, soon changed this feeling into enthusiasm. A new light seemed to dawn upon my mind, and bounding with joy, I communicated my discovery to my father. I cannot help remarking here the many opportunities the instructor possesses of directing the attention of their pupils to useful knowledge, which they utterly neglect. My father looked carelessly at the title page of my book, and said, "Ah, Cornelius Agrippa. My dear Victor, do not waste your time upon this. It is sad trash." If instead of this remark, my father had taken the pains to explain to me the principles of Agrippia had been entirely expl- had been entirely exploded, and that a modern system of science had been introduced which possessed much greater powers than the ancient, because the power of the latter were chi- commercial. No, that's not what that says, but
Chimerical.
chimerical. Well, those of the former were real and practical. Under some circumstances, I should certainly have thrown Agrippia aside, and with my imagination warmed as it was, should probably have applied myself to more rational theories of chemistry, which has resulted in modern discoveries. It is even possible that the train of my idea would never have received the fatal impulse that led to my ruin. But the cursory glance my father had taken of my volume by no means assured me that he was acquainted with its contents, and I continued to read with great avidity. When I returned home, my first care was to procure the whole works of this author, and afterwards of Paracelsus and Albert Magnus. I read and studied the wild fancies of these writers with delight. They appeared to me treasures known to few besides myself, and although I often wished to communicate these secret stores of knowledge to my father, yet his indefinite censure of my favourite Argopia always withheld me. I disclosed my discoveries to Elizabeth, therefore, under a promise of strict secrecy, but she did not interest herself in the subject, and I was left to pursue my studies alone. I may appear very strange. It may appear very strange that a disciple of Albert Magnus should arise in the 18th century, but our family was not scientific, and I had not attended any of the lectures given at the School of Geneva. My dreams were therefore undisturbed by reality. I entertained with the greatest diligence into the search of the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life. But the latter obtained my most undivided attention. Wealth was an inferior object, but what glory would attain the discovery? What glory would attend to the discovery if I could banish disease from the human frame and render man invulnerable to any but a violent death? Nor were these my only visions. The raising of ghosts or devils was a promise liberally accorded by my favorite authors, the fulfillment of which I most eagerly sought. And if my incantations were always unsuccessful, I attributed the failure rather to my own inexperience and mistake than to want of skill or fidelity of my instructors. The natural phenomena that take place every day before my eyes did not escape my examination. Distillations and the wonderful effects of steam, processes of which my favorite authors were utterly ignorant, excited my astonishment. My utter wonder was engaged by some experiments on an air pump, which I saw employed by a gentleman who we were in the habit of visiting. Just so I could check some. Alright, go. The ignorance of the early philosophers on these and several other points served to decrease their credit with me, but I could not entirely throw them aside, before some other systems should occupy their place in my mind. When I was about 15 years old, we had retired to our house near Bellarive when we witnessed the most violent and terrible thunderstorm. It advanced from behind the mountains of Jura, and the thunder burst at once with frightful loudness from various quarters of the heavens. I remained while the storm lasted, watching its progress with curiosity and delight as I stood at the door. On a, su- on a sudden, I beheld a stream of fire issue from an old and beautiful oak, which stood there 20 yards from our house, and so soon as the dazzling lights vanished, the oak disappeared and nothing remained but a blasted stump. When we visited it the early morning, we found the tree shattered in a singular manner. It was not splintered by the shock, but entirely reduced to the ribbons of wood. I never beheld anything so utterly destroyed. The catastrophe of this tree excited my extreme astonishment, and I eagerly inquired of my father the nature and origin of thunder and lightning. He replied, "Electricity," describing at the same time the various effects of that power. He constructed a small electrical machine and exhibited a few experiments. We also made a kite with a wire and string which drew down that fluid from the clouds. This last stroke completed the overthrow of Cornelius Agrippa, Arber- Albertus Magnus, and Para- Paracelsus, who had so long reigned the lords of my imagination. But by some fatality I did not feel inclined to commence the study of any modern system, and the disinclination was infused by the following circumstances. My father expressed the wish that I should attend a course of lectures upon natural philosophy, to which I cheerfully consented. Some accident prevented my attending these lectures until the course was nearly finished. The lecture, the lecturer, the lecture being therefore one of the last, was entirely incomprehensible to me. The professor uh, discoursed with the greatest fluency of potassium and boron, of sulfates and oxides, terms of which I could not affix no idea, and I became disgusted with the science of natural philosophy. But I still read Pliny and Buffon with delight, authors in my estimation of near equal interest and utility. My occupations at this age were principally the mathematics and most of the branches of study uh, appertaining to that science. I was busily employed in learning languages. Latin was already familiar to me, and I began to read some of the easiest Greek authors without the help of a lexicon. I always perfectly understood English and German. This is a list of my accomplishments at the age of 17, and you may conceive that my hours were fully employed in acquiring and maintaining a knowledge of this vast literature. Another task also devolved upon me when I became the instructor of my brother. Ernest was 6 years older than myself, 6 years younger than myself rather, and was my principal pupil. He had been affected with ill health from his infancy, through which Elizabeth had been his constant nurse. His disposition was gentle, but he was incapable of any severe application. William, the youngest of our family, was yet an infant, and most beautiful little fellow in the world. His lively blue eyes, dimpled cheeks, and uh, endearing manners aspired the tender affection. Such was our domestic circle, from which care and pain seemed ever banished. My father directed our studies, and my father partook of our enjoyments. Neither of us possessed the slightest preeminence over the other. The voice of command was never heard amongst us, but mutual affection engaged us to comply and obey the slightest desire of each other. And that is the end of chapter 1. It's already been an hour, and I only have a little bit before I need to go to bed and get up for college tomorrow. So I shall continue this whenever I decide to do another reading stream. Till then, bye.